There's a lot of talk out there about God, about who God is and what He does. In the First Commandment, God answers those questions, and He does it pretty clearly. God says two things: I am the Lord your God, and you shall have no other gods. Now, what that means and how that impacts us is what we're going to talk about as we dig into this First Commandment. When God says, I am the Lord your God, it's shorthand for saying, I'm the one who created you. I am the one who establishes you by calling you into existence. I'm the one you look to for all good. I am where you find refuge. In the second part of the commandment, when God says, you shall have no other gods, He's giving us a prohibition, setting a limit. In order to understand the prohibition, we need to look carefully at the words, beginning with the word have. When someone says they have something, it's usually referring to an object, something that has substance. We say things like, I have a pet, I have some money, I have a car. These are things you can see and touch. But this is not what we mean when we're talking about having a God. The First Commandment is not talking about God in the language of substances, but it is talking about what it is to have a God as understood in the language of relationships. Now, with no pun intended, we're getting at the heart of the matter, because relationships are rooted in our hearts. In fact, Luther says as much with his explanation to this commandment using the language of relationships. We are to fear, love, and trust God above all things. Jesus says it this way: love God with all of your heart, soul, and mind. Luke chapter 10, verse 27, Matthew chapter 22, verse 37, and Mark chapter 12, verse 30. A natural question you might have at this point is, well, how do we know whether or not we're fulfilling this commandment? Another way of saying it is, how do we know we're loving God with all of our heart? Luther, in his large catechism, a longer explanation he wrote for pastors, provided a simple way for you to recognize whether or not you're following this command. Ask yourself this: where am I putting my trust? But beware, when you ask that question, you may find yourself surprised, and you may not like what you find. Through his reading of the Holy Scriptures and his own experience, Luther realized that we all have many gods. How so? Because a God is what we turn to, or the people we turn to when things get tough. These gods come in many forms: money, career, family, our intellectual abilities. We place our hope in these things and trust that they will sustain us and give us life. But all of these things are false gods, idols. So here comes another question. How do we know the difference between a false god and the one true God? A true God is a God who delivers what He promises, who gives to you what you really need for life, a God who does what He says. False gods, or idols, will eventually fall away, unable to give us life, let alone salvation. God, in His grace, gives us this command to have no other idols, so that it is God alone to whom we cling, and God alone to whom we turn when times get tough. This is most certainly true.